Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today, we have Rick McElroy, who is the Principal Cybersecurity Strategist for VMware Carbon Black. Rick, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me. Super happy to be here.
Definitely. You got the black theme going there. Is that part of the Carbon Black kind of contrast?
It's all part of the mystique.
The mystique?
It's all part of the mystique.
Gotcha. And I see the you need one of those pictures where something pops out when you cross your eyes behind you, like a shark or something, you know? I think that would be perfect.
I have a cool comrade hat next to me to remind me of things like the malicious attackers that are out there. So,
all right, awesome. So Rick, tell us a little bit about Carbon Black, but I know you got your start in the Marine Corps. So we want to know kind of about you in general and your background and how that relates to Carbon Black.
Yeah, I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17. Ran off, did that for a few years. Met an amazing woman who didn't obviously want to marry somebody who was being deployed all the time. So I decided to transition out. And I got some really good advice as I was leaving. And my stepfather's actually been in, he was in Navy data processing. And so he had transitioned out and was over at a defense contractor. And so he was like, you should really start looking into networking. And at the time, that was like a huge growth industry. And I liked networking, but I liked breaking networks more. And that's what I found to be, I think, to have a proficiency in. And so went to work for a company, started doing a bunch of red teaming against a lot of the .com booming companies and e-commerce companies. And then I went over to Booz Allen to do that more formally against the U.S. government. And subsequent to that, I started building security programs out in San Diego. And that journey led me to finding and falling in love with a piece of technology. That piece of technology was Carbon Black. I met the co-founders. I was really interested in the outcomes that they were driving out there and the amount of visibility they were able to give defenders. And I've been here 7 years, and now as part of the acquisition with VMware, got a couple years at VMware under my belt, and it's been a really interesting, fun journey.
Interesting. So tell us about Carbon Black. You said visibility. Tell us about the products and what that means, and just because some people might not be familiar with what that product does or what that company does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Carbon Black pioneered a few technologies. One around application control, right? So still the number one product in the market out there, protecting things like legacy systems and essentially taking an endpoint, putting it into a positive security model and only allowing good node binaries to run. So that has huge security efficacy for a bunch of our customers that are out there. And then Carbon Black pioneered endpoint detection and response, right? So full visibility into the attack kill chain that attackers were executing from an endpoint perspective. And now we've seen over the last couple of years, now the industry is moving towards XDR. There's a whole lot of endpoint detection and response vendors that are out there in the space as well, which I think confirms the need in the market still to have a full picture of what's happening inside of that environment, to try to get the context and the behaviors that the attackers execute, and then move to disrupt them, whether that's preventative or from a detection and response perspective.
Interesting. So
and now we're keenly interested in working in multi-cloud security, right? So being able to enforce security controls, have that context and visibility, regardless of the multiple clouds that are in use inside of an environment.
Interesting. So, and one other thing, we kind of wanted to talk about a conference coming up, the Converge to Accelerate. Tell us about your involvement there and what you have going on.
Yeah, so it's November 9th, right? Sat down with a bunch of really smart folks like Joyce Hunter, Executive Director of the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, Paul Brown, CISO of Henry Ford Health Systems, Robert Wood, CISO for the Centers for Medicare Medicaid services. Really, the conversation was focused around current state of cybersecurity in healthcare and future discussion around some pending regulations and how I think healthcare organizations and healthcare providers can be compliant and secure hand in hand and move forward to really help battle the adversaries in this space, because we know it's having a massive detriment to patient care whenever a ransomware incident occurs or some other type of a compromise or breach inside of those environments.
All right, so we're going to take a break here from our sponsors. So we come back and we'll talk about both of those as we get back here. We'll be right back.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today, talking with Rick McElroy, the principal cybersecurity strategist at VMware Carbon Black. Rick, before the break, you kind of gave your background and what Carbon Black does, and we'll talk a little bit more about those and the conference that we're both kind of involved with here coming up for healthcare. But talk about what you do at Carbon Black. What is it, your position? What are you seeing lately? Because I was really interested in that human aspect and the burnout of what we're seeing. So let's talk about that with what you've been working with.
Yeah, I lovingly refer to myself as the mayor of Securityville. So I think forward-facing people know me from any of the mainstream media that's out there. We'll get out there on CNN, on BBC, talk about some of these breaches. More importantly, because I think problem admiration is done too much in the industry, and we really talk about effective strategies to battle these adversaries and cyber criminals, right? And so I'm always active out in the community, whether that's on Twitch, doing live streams, whether it's podcasts, webinars, really, again, trying to, I think, educate business leaders, information security leaders, and the general public. And internally to the company, we're focused around messaging strategy, product strategy, and then working as trusted advisors with our customers and prospects to really help them mature what they're doing from a cyber perspective and get more resilient as a result.
Mm-hmm. The human aspect, though, we had talked about your focus on kind of restructuring after the pandemic. Where are you going with that one?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think if you look around on LinkedIn, if you look around on Twitter, if you're paying attention to the people behind the technology and process in information security, it's been a long road. And the pandemic exacerbated that, right? So now we have an ever-expanding threat landscape from the attacker's perspective with some new innovation. We've all expanded our threat surface as we needed to spin up things like cloud services to allow our employees and people to work from anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then we've blended our home and professional lives. And so I think individuals themselves are finding it hard to unplug. I think a lot of us, adding the pandemic and other uncertainties into it, are just a little unclear about like when does this problem start to get better? When do we start to get relief as defenders? And so we have a whole effort we're going to champion in October coming up for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. You're going to see us put a whole lot of content around self-care, care for your teams, actually creating a program around people resiliency and not just technology resiliency for your organization.
I see so much focus on workforce. Let's get more people into the workforce. Do you think it's a lack of not enough people, not enough talent, that we're all run ragged, or is it the pandemic and the attack surface, like you said? What solves the problem? Are you thinking that, hey, we just take a step back? I mean, technology's not going to take a step back. We're not. When do we get that break?
Yeah, well, look, I certainly from a new to cyber, right? I'm lucky. I work with a bunch of individuals that are and organizations that are focused around solving this problem. I mean, you see this at the top of the country, right? Some of the executive orders that have come out around cyber are really about getting 50,000, 100,000 people into seats. I think for a long time we weren't partnering with recruiting teams, and so what I've seen is a huge conversation and huge movement in the space to start to make sure that we're looking as broadly as possible for candidates and not just strictly looking at people who have graduated 4 years with a computer science degree. So I think that's hugely encouraging, and that will, at a future point, provide some relief to the people. But also, I think some of the leaders need to really think about their teams and start to apply some of the models we've seen for first responders out there, right? So first responders, when they go through a traumatic issue, Marine Corps does this. There's a lesson learned period. There's safety stand downs that occur as a result, right? You kind of, as a team, talk about what could be better, take a little bit of a break, and then refocus back on the job. And we don't often get to do that in security. And so I think one of the areas that leaders are thinking about, that I'm seeing it being adopted, is this idea around job rotation, right? So sitting somebody inside of a SOC for 2 years on end, they're probably going to leave your organization. But it's like, can we start to give people a different work life for a quarter or a couple of quarters, right? And then you really start to build resiliency among skills in your team too. So if one person leaves, the team is better adept at picking up some of those responsibilities.
Interesting. Do you see a certain, like, when we hear a lot about certain demographics need certain different things, like younger people sometimes have want to rotate more than like 3 to 6 months, and they're ready to rotate. Other people like, hey, I like this job for indefinitely. This is what I like to do, and I don't want to move around. How do you address that?
Yeah, well, look, I think as a leader, you have to know your people first, right? You have to know, I think, get to know them, get to know what motivates them. Is it a public acknowledgement? Some people love that, right? Is it a bonus check? Mm-hmm. Some people are purely coin operated, right? Is it more responsibilities and moving up the leadership ladder? And so I think for each individual, you're going to have to, look amongst your team and plot those out. But I do think, it's important to be uncomfortable too. So for folks who are, hey, I like this job and I've got some comfort in that, I think shaking things up a bit is helpful there. So again, I think knowing your people and being able to, understand their strengths and weaknesses and coach them through some of the weaknesses and lean into some of the strengths is going to be needed. And that's really, you're going to need a skill evaluation along with some motivational evaluation of your people to understand that.
Interesting. So how big is Carbon Black? How many people are employed there?
Yeah, so VMware is massive. I think it's 38,000 employees was the last count that I took, and so yeah, it's a very large organization. But I have to say it's pretty amazing some of the stuff that they work on. I mean, we get to see a bunch of it, and just as a pure engineering geek, it is really cool to be part of a software engineering company like VMware.
Yeah, I was just wondering if this problem is more unique to the growth that you guys have experienced. Or do you see it industry, across the industry where there's that kind of burnout? Or is it the nature of the technology even? Like a lot of companies, it's like, this is all we have. This is the job. If you're going to come work here, or if you're going to get this degree or be in this industry, this is what you got to enjoy.
Well, I think that's part of it, right? I think those of us who have been, I've been doing this for 24 years now. We kind of understood that walking into it. But we also understood at some point, we have to start to put some things in place because it's not sustainable as a group of humans, right? And so I would say, right around probably 10 years ago, so you could start to see some of these discussions come out at RSA and Black Hat, and even DEF CON and DerbyCon had talks around mental health and well-being of individuals. And so I do think the leaders who kind of went through that were like, all right, we need to do some stuff to change it for the next generation, because after all, it's a job. And we've normalized a whole bunch of IT jobs. Sure, people still have pagers. Sure, they're still on call, but it's not every night like it was in the 90s. Stuff just doesn't break that often. And so I think even looking at our brothers and sisters in IT and applying some of those lessons learned back to security, because it should, at the end of the day, be a job. We should be allowed to take vacations and spend time with our families. And I know it attracts a lot of folks who have, like to be the hero, right? We're protectors. That's what we do. But at some point in a long career, that is absolutely, you're going to run into a buzzsaw and need to manage that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break here from our sponsors. We'll be right back in a minute. Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with Rick McElroy, and we were before the break talking about the burnout in the industry and things that VMware Carbon Black is doing for kind of a new initiatives. And starting in October, a lot of information going to come out. So, what are you recommending? What's the path forward? What types of things are you putting in place for this this people resilience, you called it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, and these aren't my plans, but I happen to think as a VMware employee, they do some pretty amazing stuff. So first thing, unlimited PTO. Look, your people are going to do the work. Allow them to actually take times. Sometimes if you've been working for 17 years straight, I think you earned a month off, right? And your organization should support that. Secondarily, I think our people care about each other. So when we have issues, when we're feeling stressed or burnout, like we can raise those issues to our bosses and not feel like there's going to be some retribution there, right? That they're and then our wellness program is pretty amazing. So look, as an organization level, put in a wellness program. Allow your employees to be reimbursed for things like exercise equipment or gym memberships or meditation sessions. Whatever those individuals choose to do from a de-stress burnout perspective. Like I can see the impacts internal to the company, and it's a night and day difference amongst a lot of the organizations that I do get to visit and speak to. And then I would say, just at an individual level, like turn your phone off. Definitely have some times where you take a tech break, and I mean, for me, it is going out fishing in the Pacific Ocean. It's going to the desert for 3 days where there's no cell towers or mobile towers, and just getting a little bit more touch in with reality. And less in touch with our digital realities, right?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. I live in Colorado, so we have lots of non-coverage areas. And it's like you always got to know where the non-coverage area is because it's like addictive. If your phone beeps, vibrates, or whatever, boom, you're off. And you can't back away from it unless it just stops. So you got to plan to go to those places where it stops.
Yes, because we can't, sometimes I don't trust myself to not look at my phone, right?
Yep, I know exactly. And that kind of segues good into the healthcare, the Converge to Excellence, and what that conference and you're making a presentation there. I guess you're personally presenting. So tell us about what people going to that and would intend to hear, and what types of things that who might want to come to listen to what's going on there.
Well, look, I mean, unfortunately, healthcare finds themselves under assault on multiple battlefronts, right? So there's a real world pandemic, and then there's a pandemic of extortion, as I like to refer to it, that's occurring inside of healthcare environments. And it's having massive impacts. I mean, look, another article came out today that's really talking about even the inability to deliver high patient services is occurring. Look, we know there's been cases in certain countries where people had to be transferred to hospitals. In the time that it took them, they couldn't receive that critical care, all of those things. The boards care, obviously the public cares, and the government really cares as well. And so typically when that happens, you start to see an increase in the amount of regulation that's occurring inside of those environments. They also have, I think, a huge secondary one, which is a consolidation and a vacuuming that's occurring inside of healthcare, where you have large organizations that are scooping up a whole bunch of insecure ones and coming up with plans for those. And then, of course, discussions around, even between individuals and their own PHI and the exchange of that in something like a digital app to cross borders, to prove that vaccines are real, and the massive proliferation of medical devices. And so, look, I think whenever you have this many forces at work, you are going to see governments involved. You are going to see an increase in the amount of regulations. Now, I think what we have to do about that is influence those people to clearly have them understand both the intended consequences and the unintended consequences of those. And one of the unfortunate unintended consequences, typically with an increase in cyber regulation, is that money has to come from somewhere. And so if I have to be compliant to do business, I'm going to spend money to be compliant to do a business. And sometimes the budget that comes from is security. Now, I do think for leaders inside of those organizations, sitting down with those compliance teams, with the internal audit teams, and driving a plan together is going to put you more closely on a path to success than kind of going at it alone. Oftentimes, compliance teams are buying tools to do audits. The IT team already has something to facilitate that, or security already has access to the data. And so I think getting together in those cases to try to drive real effective, good cybersecurity regulations for the healthcare industry is a discussion that has to be had. But it's going to be incumbent on those of us who educate those folks to make sure they truly understand what that means.
The interesting thing in everything you said, I was listening for. I chair a group on privacy and looking at what is the requirement. What's the world? How's the world handle digital privacy? And it's almost like we spend. And I heard you keep talking about regulation, compliance. Taking budget away from the planning to do what it has to do now. And so often I see us in that endless loop. And I was waiting to say, where does privacy fit in? I heard you say PII one time. But what ethical, other than just, when we look at companies following the regulatory requirements, following them, what they have to do to comply, what ethical requirements do they have to the privacy, the rights of the mass amount of people who basically are the targets of everything they're doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's in flux, and it depends on the nation that we're speaking of. Frankly speaking, some nations want full access to all data. Obviously with the goal of a better surveillance state, right? I think Europe has clearly chosen that the individuals own that data. I think the U.S. With things like CCPA and all of the new privacy acts are moving towards it. But I think fundamentally, what I think about is if we could have done a better job and won a few more battles when it came to privacy and started this journey sooner, I actually think we'd be more secure as a result. And so I do think when healthcare organizations consider these types of data, consider the types of data exchanges that are going to have to occur amongst multiple healthcare providers in that supply chain, they should really think about the minimum data set they need to collect and what happens if I want to remove it as a customer and go to another provider, right? And we're pretty bad about getting rid of data, frankly speaking. Up until recent GDPR laws, like there was no request you could make to have your data deleted, right? And so I do think converging security and privacy again into a singular conversation, because I don't see how you can do one without the other, or should do one without the other.
I've been leaning more towards the approach of we have to define privacy to know what to implement with security. We've been going after security saying, well, we'll just protect the data, but what is the requirements? The requirements on protecting it are what the privacy requirements are, whether the privacy of the individual, the privacy of the company, the privacy of the link, the privacy of that data storage repository. What requirements are there around that should drive security? Maybe we need to turn that conversation around and say privacy is the requirement for security.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you think about it, right? Even crypto, what are you attempting to do? You're attempting to keep something private between one or more parties, right? Mm-hmm. And so I look at it like they're not mutually exclusive. They should operate together. But I do think had we won a few more of those battles, I think what you see from a nation state perspective and leveraging these large data sets that they've stolen to further, efficacy on other attacks might not have existed, right? And then I think we would have put some better plans in place for when the privacy of that data was broken, right?
Yeah, I guess I could see that. But companies that have a business model, have making revenue off of whatever they're doing, need to say, what do I need to do? And I think that's what leads us to this mentality of, what do they say I have to abide by? What law is there? And keep making our business model work by meeting
Right.
that.
Yeah, but I do think that the tech ethics side of it is hugely important, and for healthcare, massive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen people, doctors' offices get ransomed, and then they go after the psychiatric patients for extortion because they have all the recordings. They have whatever issues they were talking to their counselors about, and as an individual who encourages people to seek out counseling and mental health care, like that's detrimental to individuals, right? It should be a private conversation between you and a provider. And now due to the pandemic, we put it all online, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even have to go to
Or even our doctor's
office.
appointments online. Yeah. Like, who's listening in the middle of that? I had my first couple of those, and I was like, I feel more like I'm on an interview than like I'm in a session.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It felt just like this, But in kind of moving toward the end here, anything that you want to put out about how people can get involved with either the conference, with Carbon Black, or with other efforts, go ahead and do so.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, if you want to register for the conference, you can go to HTTPS. I love when conference registrations have the S on it, right? And I'm going to spell it out. CONV2X Symposium.com. You can register. A whole bunch of great content going on around that. I would say look for a whole bunch of content that we're going to be putting out in October, as well as LinkedIn live sessions with folks like the mental health hackers. We're going to be doing some Twitter spaces again to really show. I think a lot of leaders in information security really just trying to lead this conversation and improve some people's lives from a work-life balance perspective.
Definitely love to hear that, and it's the first time that's come up on New Cyber Frontier where we talk about it, because we've been on the other side of just heads down and probably approaching burnout. So it's a good deep breath to take and kind of sit back and say, yeah, there is this other part, and I guess we're all human, right? Even though we like to think we're a robot most of the time, a lot of us techie people.
No, and I'll just say I love my InfoSec family. It's been an amazing career with an amazing bunch of people that continues to push me to learn more, to continue the journey, to support all of those things, and I'm just paying it forward. So
definitely. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining today, Rick, and you have a great day.
Hey, you too.
All right.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.